Okay, you beautiful friends, welcome back to the back of the semi-truck, and y'all can tell by the thumbnail, you can tell by the title, we are now jumping into the subject matter that is Ken Penders. I've heard the name, and just gathering from one of the comments that was made from the last Sonic video that we did around here, I'm presuming it's got something to do with legal issues and Sonic, because what we watched last time, he said something in his video that thanks Ken Penders when talking about Scourge and never seeing him again possibly because of whatever legal issues. I'm not 100% sure. I was going to watch it on my own time and check things out and stuff like that, but I just never got around to it, and I'm presuming this is going to be quite the wild ride. I don't have anything to judge by because y'all probably can't see that, but that's all I got as my starter screen. It is just a bunch of legal papers, or that's what I'm presuming it is, because yeah, I don't know what else it could be. So with that said, this is a 30-minute video, and it is coming to us from Comic Drake. I was told that he did a pretty good video on him, so I figured why not use it since it was suggested. By all means, if y'all have any suggestion for Sonic videos in general, something that's along the lines of maybe 10 to 20 minutes, maybe 25, maybe even a little shorter than 10. I don't want to necessarily do like a 3-minute video because I can only turn a 3-minute video into like 10 minutes. But if it's a longer video, we could definitely sit down and just hit that pause button and dissect it and all this other stuff. So with that said, this is 30 minutes long, so I do not want to waste no more time because I don't know how long this is going to take. A 30-minute video, this could range anywhere from an hour to an hour and 40 minutes, hour and a half, I don't know. One way to find out though is to just put those on and start this in 3, 2, 1, and play.
Sonic the Hedgehog might be the fastest thing alive, but if there's one thing he can't outrun, it's the law. Now, the Sonic franchise has gone through several highs and lows throughout time, but unless you've actively been keeping up with them, you might not realize that the Sonic comics are a massive deal in the comic book industry, and they have been wrapped up in one of its biggest series of legal battles. These books are infamous for how straight up bonkers they are. From Tails fusing with his many multiversal variants to become a massive titan of nearly endless power, to Knuckles having been revealed to have been a genetically modified superweapon because his dad experimented on him as a kid, to one character straight up dying from eating a chili dog that was laced with LSD.
Okay, I thought it wasn't going to get much worse than Knuckles being a scientific experiment because his dad experimented on him, but then we get the chili dog being laced with LSD. I now want to go find that issue. It doesn't sound like a fun issue, but that sounds like a wacky issue. I want that. We're here for Ken Penders, but we also get chili dog LSD. Hey, let's do it. Let's continue this and play.
See, although it started with silly slapstick humor, the Sonic comics evolved into an insane furry political soap opera with minimal oversight from Sega, which they would come to regret considering that things got so unbelievably absurd both in the comics and behind the scenes that Sega had to come in and completely destroy the comic book universe twice. And at the center of it all is one man, the single most hated person in the entire Sonic fandom, the mad god of Sonic himself, Kenneth W. Penders II. By weaving his way through the law, Ken Penders managed to walk away with...
Pause. I was fine with it until he mentioned second. I don't know what it is about when I hear people talk, give their full name and it's such and such the second. I'm a second. So I kind of feel like that groups me in with him a little bit. Oh, and sorry if you're looking up here in whichever corner I'm in without my glasses because I was cleaning my glasses. But, oh wow, I can see again. But nonetheless, holy crap, that just, him being, you know, the second makes me feel like I've got a connection with him, which I know I don't, but it just feels weird with me being a second as well. Well, I'm not going to give my full real name and stuff. Granted, it sounds really political, but I'm not going to give it. Just know that I am Billy the Second. We'll just go with that. Let's continue and play.
Over 200 characters, and is now using them to create this. And how it ended up happening is truly bizarre. So for my 400,000 subscriber special, I have combed through pages and pages worth of legal documents, publications, and blogs to capture all of the twists and turns of this massive debacle. Strap in, folks, because this one's a doozy. Hello and welcome to Comic Drake, where I talk about comic books and my name is Drake. Let's talk about it. Okay, it's the middle of summer in Texas. I cannot keep wearing this. It's too damn hot. But before jumping into things, I need to give a big thank you to the sponsor of today's video, Skillshare.
Pause. I'm going to let him, well, I don't know. Maybe I might just go ahead and skip it in editing with the whole Skillshare thing. But maybe I will, maybe I won't. I don't know. But, holy crap. He unzipped that. I was like, whoa, dude, what video am I watching? Holy crap. But, nonetheless, more than likely, I'll decide this in a minute. But we might skip the Skillshare thing. We might not. We'll find out in editing, but let's continue and play.
So you can start exploring your creativity today.
Balls. So, as y'all can tell, I ended up skipping the ad read because first and foremost, I don't even know if his Skillshare link is still available or none of that, but by some chance it is, and you want to go support, you know, Comic Drake, just type in Comic Drake into whatever, you know, promo code you need to type it into. But here we are, part 1, the Pendering. I don't know how I feel about that name, nor that mustached smile on that person's face. I'm presuming that's Ken Penders himself, but that doesn't look like the pictures I've seen. Either way, let's get that picture off the screen and continue and play.
The comic book adaptation of Sonic the Hedgehog was released in 1992 and was loosely based on the cartoon by Deke Entertainment. This show, lovingly referred to as Sonic's Sad AM by its fans because of its Saturday morning time slot, is rather different from the small handful of video games that were released at the time. In this continuity, Dr. Robotnik had already succeeded in taking over the world before the events of the show, and it was Sonic's mission to take him down with the help of the Freedom Fighters, a group of animal commandos that were created specifically for this cartoon. Although Sad AM was certainly darker than Sonic media up until that point, it was still very lighthearted, and the comic that followed, produced over at Archie Comics, was much more the same, if not more childish. The early issues were extremely silly and downright nonsensical at times, like when Sonic got flung into an alternate dimension where he met a couple of physics-defying imps named Vertical and Horizontal. Remember them because they're actually going to come up later. But when the comics editor heard that one of the writers might be stepping down, he started looking for someone, anyone, to take over.
Balls, okay. So, yeah, the freedom fighting, you know, people, I said this in the last video, but that group, for some reason, reminds me of the Mutanimals for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. So, I don't know, throwing that comparison out there, that's who they remind me of. It's like they're just this side group of characters that were created because, just in case, here's this other group of characters we can kind of bring into, you know, from the bullpen as well. So, yeah, and it started out very, very childish, they say, but yet in the last video we did, we had Evil Sonic SA somebody. Yeah, this didn't go the child route that they thought it was, did it? Holy crap. But they're looking for a new writer, which means Ken Penders is about to come into the picture. So let's continue this and play.
The editor approached a man named Mike Kantarovich for the job, but Mike had never even heard of Sonic before, prompting him to hit up his close friend and colleague, Ken Penders, who had a son that was an avid video game fan. Although Penders was by no means a big-name creator at the time, he had worked for plenty of big comic publishers, including Marvel, DC, and even Disney, which, by the way, used to be a huge deal way back in the day. For context, Donald Duck is, to this day, the single most published comic book character outside of the superhero genre. Penders and Kantarovich got the job and were basically allowed to do whatever they wanted, with neither Sega or Archie Comics giving them any guidelines on what kind of stories they wanted, or even what the characters they were writing were supposed to be like.
We would just pitch story after story, and we had no feedback whatsoever. They didn't tell us what stories to write. They didn't tell us what the characters should be like. The only thing they said was Sonic is cool and hip. That's it. That's the only direction we were given. You know, he has attitude.
Despite the lack of direction.
Pause. Okay. That's honestly the first time I've even heard Ken's voice. This is going to sound awful. Going to sound utterly awful. But there's one picture that I continuously see of Ken Penders out there, and he looks Chinese. And that's what confused me about the picture that we saw a second ago, because we had this middle-aged, mustache white guy, and I was just like, okay, this Ken Penders, is he like a chameleon? And I thought he was like at least half Chinese. I don't know. I told y'all it was going to sound horrible. So I don't understand who we're actually dealing with here, because I guess it's actually some white guy that wrote some stories and took, Sonic and not Hasbro. Good, wait, Sega. What am I thinking? Holy crap! I was thinking of My Little Pony, probably. Because Hasbro. Oh my gosh. You know what? I'm not even going to finish my thought, because it sounded horrible from the start about me seeing a Chinese guy and thinking that's Ken Penders. I apologize to the Chinese for that. Let's continue. And
Ken and Mike's Sonic comic was a rousing success, but it quickly turned into a solo project for Ken as Mike decided to journey out to greener pastures. As time went on, the tone of the series shifted from slapstick humor to something quite a bit more serious, like this whole sequence about how Sonic now understands the true meaning of war. Oh, and remember Horizontal and Vertical? Well, Ken turned them into robotic demigods that went to war with each other because each of them believes the other is responsible for the near destruction of their dimension.
Pause. If I remember them two correctly, Horizontal and Vertical, they were nothing like what Ken did to them, because these are obvious. Well, I'll be fair. Comic Drake did tell us that Ken turned them into robotic demigods, but how that being possible from what we had, I don't know. But I mean, don't get me wrong, they seem pretty cool looking. One travels, vertical on one wheel, and one travels horizontal, it looks like. Oh my god, this is just weird. I'll just be real. How can you take those two people that come from a different dimension that look like they're from a 1920s, comic strip to this? It's whatever.
Look, these comics were weird. Penders was absolutely obsessed with his creations, heavily focusing on their romantic lives and constantly introducing long-lost relatives, especially with Knuckles' family. Like, this dude even put out an extensive family tree, painstakingly laying out his lineage, which also reveals that his girlfriend is a distant cousin. Like, I get that it's so far back that the familial relation doesn't really matter, but they don't have to be related. You don't have to write that. But hey, I mean, keep the bloodline pure, I guess. The Knuckles stuff used to just be tacked on to the back of the Sonic comics, but eventually he got his own book, allowing for the Knuckles lore to wildly spin out of control, more or less interrupted by the main Sonic series. Additionally, because of that, the Knuckles comics were almost entirely about Ken's own original characters, so he wasn't beholden to most of the few guidelines that Sega demanded. So Penders could basically do any storyline that he wanted. But out of all of his creations, it's Lara Sue, the future daughter of Knuckles, that Penders has the greatest fascination with, and it'll inform a lot about his future, ultimately leading to Regardless, the Sonic comics were a massive success, thanks to the character's popularity in other mediums, a highly devoted fan base, and actually selling the comics in places like grocery stores instead of dedicated out-of-the-way shops. It's almost as if selling stuff where people are actually going results in people buying it. Who'd have thought? Due to his clout within the Sonic franchise, Penders was invited to work on other official stuff like the cover art for the DVD box set of Sad AM. But Ken decided that he wanted to be even more involved, leading to his magnum opus, Sonic Armageddon.
I'll pause it right there real fast. Oh my gosh. Yeah, that was a lot that I let play through real fast, but Knuckles' daughter, I know we're going to get back around to everything with that picture he showed, but I didn't even know Knuckles had a daughter, and Comic Drake is telling us that he has a really big fascination with her the most. That felt creepy hearing that. I'm just saying. Yeah, I can't think of nothing else on that, but obviously, I say this a lot. I don't want to just let the video play through without actually saying something about something. So, yeah, we'll continue now, though. So, holy crap. Play.
In 2002, Ben Hurst, one of the writers for Sad AM, pitched a continuation of the classic show as either a new season or as a movie. When word got to Penders that Hurst was trying to get the ball rolling, he wanted in. Although Ben brought Ken on board, Penders stabbed his new collaborator in the back and went directly to Sega, essentially telling them, "Hurst is trying to take the hedgehog for his own. End him, and give the rodent to me. I'll bring you something beautiful." For some reason, Sega actually listened to Ken, and he went off to work on this pitch.
Uncle Chuck! Uncle Chuck! Whoa! This is way past cool!
Oh my god, I really wish I could show you more.
Pause. What even was that? I honestly have no idea. All I heard was Uncle Chuck. I don't know what that pitch was. That was nothing. That was literally just, it felt like a smaller version of Sonic getting onto a, Silver Surfer surfboard and starting to go around and then getting shot. I don't know what that even was. But, whatever. I mean, maybe if Comic Drake could show us more, I would understand more. Maybe I'll go look that up and find out more about it myself. I have no idea. But either way, let's hit this play and play.
This, but because of how trigger-happy Penders gets with lawsuits, which, trust me, we will be getting into later in the video, I honestly think that he would try to take me to court over this. I mean, hell, I'd be extremely surprised if he didn't try to take down this entire video, regardless. But still, I need you guys to remember something extremely important here. Ken legitimately went to Sega and sat them down to watch this pitch.
Whoa!
Now, the concept art that Penders drew up for the project was significantly better than the video, but Sega obviously declined the pitch, though they didn't seem too turned off by the dude since Ken was still allowed to work on the Sonic comics with, again, minimal oversight. This allowed Penders and his cohorts to continue to do whatever they wanted, like make a group of Nazi echidnas that straight up do the Sieg Heil. And also, they took one of the most famous poems about the Holocaust, but changed up the words to make it about foxes and hedgehogs. Big yikes. All Sega ever really asked of Ken and his collaborators was to occasionally incorporate the recent game releases into the comic's plot, but they also refused to send him any of the games in question, or even resources for them to know what the games were even about. This came to a boiling point in 2006, when Penders was asked to incorporate the Shadow the Hedgehog game into the comic, causing him to leave in order to pursue work where he had a bit more creative.
Pause. Okay, so being fair to Ken, without knowing too much details, if they ask him to incorporate the new games and projects and stuff like that into the comics, but they don't give him any resources to know what happens in the games, then they can't really blame him when he's kind of doing his own thing, because he doesn't know what the games are even about. So, yeah, I'll give him a little slack there, but, you know, doing an Echidna tribe in the, doing certain salutes and then changing the poem to be for Robotnik and them, that's a little weird. There's a lot of weirdness that needs to be overlooked in some of these Ken Penders things. I truly want to actually be able to find the time to go and read the original Sonic, comic books, but I can't find any, honestly. I could find them, but I can't find them in, like, volumes, collected volumes, such as, I will use the library, my library's app. I'll find it on the phone and then just read it that way, but I can't even find them there. I might be able to find them on Comixology. I don't know. Either way, let's continue, because I know I'll never get around to actually fully reading comic stories of the Archie comics. So let's continue and play.
Of control, specifically in Hollywood. Yeah, Ken, good luck with that.
Whoa.
One of these projects was a political drama called The Republic, and all that ever got produced was a pilot episode, and it's not good.
Oh man, I'm late. I gotta go. Man, I'm late. I gotta go. Gotta go. Oh, hey, Betty, wait, careful. I got coffee. Bye-bye.
Penders also launched an indie comic in the year 2000 called The Lost Ones, which is about Japanese superhumans that were mutated descendants of those who survived the nuclear bombs dropped in World War II. The comic was canceled after just one issue, but Ken was so convinced that this was a, quote, best-selling comic that he wanted to turn it into the next great superhero film. Here's a clip from the trailer, because it was very much not that.
Pause. Okay, I know I'm not letting the trailer play out right now, but seeing this actress and that horrible green screen, yeah, I feel sorry for her. I honestly do. Holy crap. I'm sorry that she had to be a part of that project. Good gosh. This is going to be horribly bad, but gloriously good as well. Not good for the right reasons, but yeah. Let's continue and... Wait. Really fast. The comic idea he did have, though, about, survivors being mutated from the bombs back at Hiroshima. Sounds like a pretty good idea on paper. The execution, though, however, I'm just imagining that it was horrible execution. Let's watch this trailer that he put together and find out how horrible the execution was. And play.
To this day, Penders is still trying to get every single one of these projects off the ground. And you know what? More power to him. In any other circumstance, this would be where the story ends. This video would just be some lighthearted laughs about an eccentric creator and the weird stuff that he and his collaborators produced. But like I foreshadowed at the top of the video, what follows is one of the most insane legal battles in all of comic history. Penders is a complete underdog, and throughout this next segment, it's going to seem like he doesn't have a leg to stand on. The man makes a complete buffoon of himself at every turn, and yet despite it all, he ended up winning the suits, and essentially walked away with the rights to an entire comic book universe.
Okay, so part 2, The Pender Chronicles. Okay, so judging, I'm trying to figure this out. Judging by what Comic Drake has told us so far, I don't know exactly where it's going to go, but I can speculate real fast that Ken has these lawsuits. I'm presuming Scourge, Evil Sonic, whoever, I'm presuming that he's going to be a part of this lawsuit, but he gets a whole comic universe out of it. That does mean that Sonic's not in that universe, Tails is not in that universe, I'm presuming Knuckles is not in that universe. So who the heck did he even get besides Knuckles' daughter? Which is going to feel weird later on. I'm just going ahead and saying it now that that's going to be weird later on down the road. But yeah. So what comic book universe is he going to get? This is going to be weird. I don't know exactly what he's going to get, but the fandom hates him, or at least a majority of them do. So we're going to find out why. Let's go with this and play.
In 2008, BioWare released an RPG for the Nintendo DS called Sonic Chronicles: The Dark Brotherhood. Although the game was just okay, Sonic Chronicles was a love letter to all things Sonic, which of course included the comics. The antagonists of the game are the titular Dark Brotherhood, aka the Nocturnus Clan, a group of ancient echidnas that were sealed away within a dimension called the Twilight Cage by Knuckles' ancestors. There is zero doubt that these guys were inspired by the Dark Legion from the Archie comics. You know, a group of ancient echidnas that were sealed away within a dimension called the Twilight Zone by Knuckles' ancestors. But where things got real messy is that Sonic Chronicles prominently featured a character named Shade, an ass-kicking female echidna that defected from the Nocturnus clan. Just like Julie Sue, Ken's writer's pet, who is an ass-kicking female echidna that defected from the Dark Legion. Now, this shouldn't be an issue. After all, Penders is working with Archie Comics as a work-for-hire freelancer, and everything he wrote for them is the legal property of Sega. He even said as much himself in an interview with Sonic HQ News in 1999, stating, quote,
"Part of the contract Sega has with Archie stipulates any and all characters created in the Sonic & Knuckles comic books become property of Sega. Thus, Sega now owns everything I created in the Knuckles series, including Locke, Lara Lee, and Julie Sue, to say nothing of characters like Jeffrey St. John, Hershey, Dr. Quack, and Robbo the Hedge, to name but a
Pause. Okay, so if that's the case, if Sega owns all these characters, I'm trying to figure out, because I'm presuming that he ends up getting the rights to these characters right here that they're talking about. If that's the case, then how the heck, with a statement like that, any court system would be like, look, you literally said this. This is in the contract, so this is theirs. I'm trying to figure out how he even won the case then, if that's what happened. I don't know. So much about Ken Penders confuses me. Holy crap. Let's continue though, because we're going to find out eventually. And
few.
In spite of all of that, Penders still thought that he deserved a cut of the game's profits, and demanded that Archie's editor-in-chief, Victor Gorelek, give him a copy of his original contract, to which Gorelek replied, "There isn't one." This prompted Ken to go ahead and file copyrights for everything that he had ever done for the company, including his original characters. And listen, for as much as I have been and will continue to shit on Penders during this video, I actually have to side with him here. These stories and characters were oftentimes weird and unnecessary, but they were his weird and unnecessary stories and characters. And if Archie was going to be this incompetent with their filings, then Ken would be stupid not to try and take full ownership of his work. Yeah, everyone, himself included, understood that Sega should own the work, but as someone that believes in creators' rights, I think this was a valid
balls. Yeah, I can't argue with that. If Penders goes to them and says, hey, look, I need a copy of the original contract because I'm trying to, see some things in it, and they're like, hey, what are you talking about? There is no original contract. If there isn't... Okay, so the statement that he said was before that, he was under the assumption that the original contract says, hey, anything I create while writing for, Archie Sonic, Archie Comics, Sonic, hey, that's all now a part of Sega. Okay, cool. He was under that assumption. But when he asked for the contract, there's no contract? Oh, well, in that case, you know what? If y'all don't have a contract, these characters are what I created, so this is now my stuff. So, I get it. You can't really argue with the logic there. I mean, if he's in the legal right to claim ownership of them, he created them. I'm with Comic Drake here. You know, go claim them, copyright them. That way then when they use it later on down the road, they have to pay you, or you just keep it away from them, which is probably why the fandom hates him now. Let's continue. And
move. On top of that, Archie Comics has a long and storied history of screwing over its creators. Most famously, there's Dan DeCarlo, who developed the entire Archie style and created some of the most famous characters like Sabrina the Teenage Witch and Josie and the Pussycats. I mean, hell, Josie is even named after his wife. DeCarlo worked at Archie Comics for decades, but was never given a proper cut of the earnings when his creations were adapted into other mediums, so he sued his employer. But they clapped back with, "Nope, you were work for hire, bucko," and they fired him. Which, I mean, yeah, that's accurate and can't be disputed, but that's not the most egregious issue. What brings my blood to a boil is how DeCarlo was scrubbed from the history of Archie Comics altogether, such as this page that breaks the fourth wall as Betty declares him to be her favorite artist. But when it was re-released, the dialogue was completely rewritten to remove any mention of DeCarlo.
Pause. That kind of makes me hate Archie Comics. I mean, not the characters of Archie Comics or anything like that, but them as a company. I mean, that's, hopefully they changed their ways, don't get me wrong, but that kind of makes me hate them as a company because, I mean, geez, if they're going to do that to their creators, especially one as pivotal as who he was, creating Sabrina the Teenage Witch and Josie and the Pussycats, those were two really big things for him. And that's the way they that sounds like they screwed him over big time. Holy crap. Wow. I want to look more into that now. I had no idea Archie Comics was that horrible. I hope they change their ways. Let's continue. And play.
Once again, I am not a fan of Ken Penders, but a victory here against Archie Comics is a victory for creators all over the industry who have been taken advantage of and disrespected by the companies they worked for. Regardless, the US Copyright Office sent notices of Ken's filings to both Sega and Archie, allowing them an opportunity to challenge his claim of ownership, but neither company responded, granting Ken victory by default. The best kind of victory. That being said though, if you actually take a look at the certificates that Penders filed, he was only seeking ownership for the text and art that he created. And from what I can see, there's nothing about the characters, which is interesting because that was what Ken was specifically boasting about owning. Even though I'm rocking this very stylish vest and tie combo, I am by no means a copyright lawyer. But several of them have taken a look over these documents.
Balls. You know what? He is rocking that vest and tie combo. Just wanted to agree with him. Let's continue. And play.
And if the characters weren't involved, then you would think that somebody would have brought that up. And since they didn't, then we can just assume that for all intents and purposes, Ken's filings did in fact give him copyright of these characters. With his ownership of the IP now cemented, Penders sent a cease and desist letter to Archie, claiming that their continued use of his original characters was completely unauthorized. Although editor Mike Paroletto claimed that Ken's claims were, quote, bizarre and unfounded, and that a single phone call from Archie's legal team would have sent him packing, the Penmeister refused to back down, stating that he would use, quote, every legal means at his disposal to protect and preserve his rights, challenging Archie to make a move. Oh, and in the meantime, Penders went ahead and sued Sega and Electronic Arts for ripping off his concept of the Dark Legion in Sonic Chronicles. Archie finally took defensive action by filing a lawsuit of their own against Penders, hoping to settle once and for all who properly owned the various stories and characters, even though they had previously dropped the ball entirely by not responding to the Copyright Office's invitation to challenge Ken's claims in the first place. Now, remember how Ken was told that his original work-for-hire contract didn't exist? Well, Archie managed to dig up a photocopy of one, and it was pretty sus. See, this document was signed in 1996, 2 years after Penders began his tenure on the Sonic comic. Archie's lawyers claimed this was because the original contract was lost or destroyed due to incompetence on—
Pause. Okay, so Archie Comics sucked as a company. Let me reiterate that. But now they're producing a photograph, just a photograph of the original contract. That sounds shady all in itself, but then it's 2 years after the fact that Ken Penders actually started doing anything for them. Yeah, and then they don't even respond to any of the copyright legal notices from the copyright offices. Archie Comics, y'all need to get y'all's acts together. Granted, yes, this was back in the day, but, you know, hopefully y'all got y'all's act together now, because I know there's still some... Is there still Archie Comics out there? I think there is. So they really need... Well, then again, I know the Sonic IP is now with... I think it's with IDW now? Yeah, I think so. So the comic book IP is with them. I'm surprised that IDW is still around, but hey, they're doing their thing. So I don't think Archie Comics in general. Maybe Archie Comics ain't around. Who does the Archie Comics then? IDW? I don't know. Either way though, hopefully they got their act together. Hopefully they quit screwing anybody over, because I've done lost the plot of where I was when I first started talking about what they were doing. I think I remember exactly where I was, talking about this shadiness of this contract and the fact that they can't even respond when they were asked to respond about this copyright notice. No wonder Ken won. That is specifically why he won. Because Archie just screws people over, and they couldn't even have their stuff together. Either way, whatever. Continue and play.
On their part. And Ken was given this one afterwards, so they would at least have something on the record. Now, just to make things clear, this new 1996 contract was just a photocopy, with Archie's lawyers unable to find the original. And for those keeping track at home, this means that Archie somehow managed to lose 2 of Ken's contracts. Penders refused to believe this and took things a step further by asserting that the 1996 document was a straight-up forgery, and he claimed that a comic publisher like Archie would have all the tools and skills necessary to forge a document like this, which, although it's not inaccurate, that is a huge accusation. Considering that Ken had been so confident about his claims and was goading Archie to come at him, you would think that he wouldn't have any issue with duking it out with him in the courtroom. But as soon as the lawsuit was thrown his way, Penders tried his very best to have the entire case dismissed over a lack of jurisdiction, since it was filed in New York. After all, Penders doesn't live in New York. He has never done business in New York, and he was living off of unemployment with less than $500 in his bank account, so he couldn't travel to New York for a court hearing. Again, I know I'm rocking the vest and tie combo, but I'm not a financial advisor. But if you don't have a source of income, maybe it's not the best idea to file over 135 copyrights at $45 a pop, hire a lawyer, and try to take on 2 of the biggest video game publishers of all time over one of the most famous mascots in all of gaming history, while simultaneously trying to claim ownership of a major comic book publisher's best-selling series because you think you own the concept of evil Sonic from an alternate dimension that wears sunglasses and a leather jacket.
Pause. I only have $500 in my bank account. Oh, but yeah, 100 and X, let's just say 100. We'll just say an even 100 copyright claims at $45 a pop, you know? So, you know, that's only $4,500, and that's back in the 90s. Oh no, I don't have money. That's a falsehood, obviously. He had money, or he couldn't be doing what he was doing. So, yeah. Yeah. Let me make sure my math is correct. 100, 45, 0045, yep, $4,500. On the low end, just for all these copyright filings. That's just the filings. That's not even including everything else on the back end. So, yeah, he had the money, or he wouldn't be doing what he was doing now. Well, then. Y'all know what I mean. So, yeah, either way, we are at 17 minutes on this 30-minute video. I feel like we are really rolling along. I don't know how long it's still going to be, but hopefully this won't be like entirely like a 2-hour video or nothing like that. I think I can keep it under an hour and 20. Let's find out and play.
This motion to dismiss was denied, and Penders was flung straight into the fray. So yeah, at this point, Ken is dealing with 2 lawsuits at the same time, so things are going to get a little bit chaotic as we bounce back and forth between them. So let's start off with the Archie case, since that's definitely the most involved of the two. Ken's team came out swinging with 3 letters from former Sonic comic writers and artists that all backed up his claims that they were never given work for hire contracts, with Scott Shaw also stating that he's following Ken's footsteps by registering copyrights for his creations as well, which he got. On top of that, Penders claimed that former Archie editor Justin Gabry once told him that he had approached Archie's higher-ups with a suggestion that they include work for hire language on all of their checks, just to keep things above board, but he was told by those higher-ups that it was completely unnecessary. Archie's legal team insisted on referring to Ken's 1996 contract, and they clapped back at his assertion that it was a forgery, as it was mere speculation and conjecture at best, and at its worst, it's a perversion of our judicial system. When directly questioned about the document's authenticity while under oath, Penders immediately backed down like the spineless bastard that he is. Meanwhile, Ken's lawsuit over at Sega and EA was dismissed, despite all parties involved wanting to continue further. The judge basically told Penders that he needed to finish things up with Archie first, because the ruling of that case would have a significant impact on his lawsuit against Sega and EA. But ignoring this completely, Penders refiled the Sega EA case just 4 days later. Now, of course.
Pause. Okay, so advice to Ken Penders, by some weird chance you want to make another lawsuit again. If a judge tells you to do something, you listen to that judge. You don't just sit there and go, okay, sure, that's exactly what I'll do. And then 4 days later, go and do another filing. You just listen to the judge. That's what you do. You wait for the other case for Archie to be finished so that this judge can look at that case and be like, okay, now that we got these things in order, now we can proceed with this one because it has a huge impact on what we're doing here. Listen to the judge next time. Don't go off and create filings 4 days later. Just saying. Let's continue and play.
I will take every single opportunity to continuously dunk on Penders, but refiling this quickly wasn't just because he was impatient. See, the statute of limitations on copyright infringement is only 3 years, which was fast approaching for Sonic Chronicles, so Ken was worried that if he didn't have his day in court as soon as possible, then he would miss out on the opportunity to receive damages. Now, it's worth noting that because this case was dismissed without prejudice, Penders could refile it at any time to collect said damages, but they would only be for the continued sales of the game. He wouldn't get a cent of the initial sales in 2008, which is where the vast majority of the purchases were made, unless he filed before the statute of limitations was up. Even though this concern was plenty valid, the same judge dismissed Ken's refiling by basically telling him,
Order in the court, please. Okay, so before we get started, Ken?
Guilty.
I literally just told you to get your shit settled with Archie before coming back here. The hell are you breathing in my presence for?
in the midst of
Pause. That's what I'm saying. That is probably literally what a judge said to him. Granted, I know that's an over-exaggeration, but that's probably how it went down. Literally. When a judge tells you to do something, as long as they're fully within their jurisdiction with their ruling, you listen to that judge. Because they've got the power, not you. Ken's Ken. Okay, let's continue and
all of this, Penders unveiled his most infamous creation, the Lara Sue Chronicles, a series of graphic novels starring his original characters that would be a reworking of his plot for Sonic Armageddon. Remember, this was announced in the middle of the lawsuit against Archie Comics over these characters, so Ken covered his tracks by making the characters legally distinct. For one, the art style is different, to say the least. Also, these aren't echidnas. No, 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 these are alien echidnias. Oh, and even if it was later decided that Penders did in fact own his original characters, it is impossible to deny that he doesn't and will never own Knuckles. So instead, Ken just renamed him to Knox, but made zero effort to differentiate him from the version that he wrote in a storyline in the future that he had made for the Archie comics books. Speaking of Archie though, let's get back to that.
Pause. Okay. So, Archie and Sega, in my opinion, have a lawsuit with that. That is copyright infringement. He doesn't own Knuckles. Doesn't matter which version of Knuckles he's using, it's still the character of Knuckles. So Knox, he is not in the legal right with that. Not in the slightest little bit. Oh my gosh. What the heck is Knox? Laura Sue, by the way? That is literally like only... You literally took half the name of Mary Sue and just called her Laura. So she's pretty much a Mary Sue. Oh my gosh. Ken, you literally tried to steal the character of Knuckles. What? Oh my god, I don't even have words. You're having a lawsuit about copyright and then commit copyright infringement with the character of Knox. You can't write this kind of stuff. This is literally, holy crap. Whatever. Let's continue. I know I say whatever a lot. Sorry, but it is what it is. And
that lawsuit. This should have been an open and shut case for Archie, but their incompetence every step of the way wasn't doing them any favors. So they straight up fired their entire legal team and hired a new one mid-trial. Eventually though, Penders and Archie's new team agreed to settle the case, but the two parties couldn't come to terms as to what that would even look like. During these negotiations, Archie Comics did their very best to wipe their hands clean of Ken's characters altogether. First, they had a villain basically yeet every echidna that wasn't Knuckles into an alternate dimension, never to be seen again. This was followed up by the incredible Mega Man Sonic crossover, which ended with a phenomenon called the Super Genesis Wave, which irreparably altered the Sonic comic universe by essentially obliterating all of Ken's over 244 characters out of existence and rewriting the timeline. I'll be honest, this isn't a huge loss since most of the characters were just the so many unnecessary—
Pause. With that last statement he just said with the so many echidnas, it feels like that Ken Penders had this obsession with echidnas. So in all reality, all they had to do was get rid of the echidnas and make Knuckles the last of his kind, and problem solved. And maybe there's a few other characters like Evil Sonic. Like, how can you even get the copyright claim to Evil Sonic? That doesn't even make sense. So I don't even understand that one at all. Oh my gosh. Evil Sonic, I think he has copyright over. But either way, yeah. Although I do want to go check out that Mega Man and Sonic crossover, because that actually sounds like, if you're jumping into the Sonic universe, that sounds like a good jumping on point to kind of let's go forward from here type situation. Although all the craziness before that sounds really interesting. I don't know. This is all some craziness here. But either way though, we are really drudging along, and we're at 21 minutes of this video. I think I'm doing very well with not extending this out to like an hour and a half. I thought it was going to go on forever. But hey, we're going along with this. Let's continue and
echidnas, and people like Sonic but a girl, and Sonic but he's Robin Hood. And see, that's really the crux of it. The reason that Ken and Archie couldn't agree on a settlement was due to the nature of the majority of these characters being derivative works of characters that at the end of the day are clearly owned by Sega. Therefore, it was difficult to come up with a fair agreement of terms without Sega's direct involvement. But here's the crucial thing. If Daddy Sega got involved in the case, then Archie would have to be responsible for covering their legal fees, and they did not want to do that. Not to mention that bringing them in this incredibly stupid lawsuit would really hurt their working relationship. Because of the issue of derivative works, it was looking like this case was going to have to be taken to trial by jury, which would need its own approval. When Archie's new legal team came before the judge and laid out the situation, he said, quote, "So are you saying prior counsel blew it?" To which Archie's lawyer responded without missing a beat, "Absolutely, Your Honor." About a month later, the two parties were able to come to a settlement without taking the case to jury. Archie refused—
Balls. Holy crap. Well, first off, I gotta take these headphones off for a second because that's hurting my ear. And secondly, holy crap. How are you just going to say that, oh, so the former counsel blew it? Absolutely. So the former counsel blew your case, so you have no case, essentially, is what the judge asked. So, yeah, this is Archie Comics. Y'all suck all the way around. Holy crap. And I'm going to be real with y'all. If I am slightly sweating, it's that temperature outside where the truck, I have to set it to turn on and off automatically. And I don't want to have it turning on and off in the middle of recording. If I'm going to record, I want it to stay running, through the whole recording. That way I don't have on, off, on, off, on, off. So, yeah, I'm sorry if you see me slightly sweating. It should only be like 66 degrees outside, I believe. Fahrenheit, by the way. So, it's not necessarily hot or anything outside, but it's getting a little warm in here. So, if you see me kind of glistening, I'm sorry. But, it is what it is. Let's do it anyway. Let's see how much more incompetent Archie Comics can be. And
refused to acknowledge that Ken owns the copyrights to his characters, but agreed that they would not pursue legal action against him if the art specifically doesn't look or feel like it belongs within the Sonic universe. Which certainly explains why the Lara Stu Chronicles looks the way it does. With this half win under his belt, Penders set his sights back on Sega and EA to finally see if he could get that pot of gold that he thought was owed to him from the sales of Sonic Chronicles. But the problem here is that even when he first filed this all the way back in 2010, the sales for the game had pretty much dried up. Or as Sega's lawyer put it in this released audio from the hearing,
he stated in his complaint that he believes that the sales began in July of 2008, but he didn't even file suit against my clients until May 31st, 2011, which is 2.5 years after the first sales allegedly began.
So it's now a thimble of gold.
Well, the pot was gone at that point.
And with that, the case against Sega and EA was at long last dismissed without prejudice. Throughout all these trials and tribulations, all Ken walked away with was an intense desire by all of these companies to never see him again. Archie doesn't republish his work, and the cliffhanger at the end of Sonic Chronicles is going to be forever unresolved, with the game itself being labeled as non-canon, with no plans for
balls. And that right there is probably why the fandom and everybody that loves Sonic hates Ken Penders. Because Archie doesn't re-release all his work, which means pretty much all the early issues. That explains why I can't find any volumes of it on the Hoopla app, which is what, my local library uses. So when I go to the comic section of my library's app and I type in Sonic, all I'm getting is IDW stuff. So thanks, Ken, because they don't re-release any of the early stuff. So thanks a lot, dude. You suck just as much as Archie Comics and their freaking morality and their legal team and everything. And then on top of that, the folks that play the games, they now will never have a sequel to a game that they thoroughly enjoyed. So yeah, that's why. And then, me listening to this, I don't like him just because of the whole Laura Sue thing. That just looks weird, but he's going full throttle with it nonetheless. Yeah. It's Ken Penders. Let's continue and play.
And because the companies simply don't want to bother, Penders keeps making these self-indulgent victory laps by constantly going on Twitter to brag about his work and his quote-unquote wins in court.
Pause. I paused it way too late. That sucks. I was going to read that out loud, but oh well. I paused it a little bit too late, and if I try to rewind, I'm not even going to mess with that because that's going to be an editing nightmare. So, just let's continue, and hopefully I still put it up there for y'all to see, but yeah. Okay. Sorry about that. Let's continue. Oh my gosh, what I do have is some crudely drawn whatever this stuff is. So, yeah. Is that... oh my gosh, this is some kind of ugly... This is like some... I'm not even gonna... You know what? I'm gonna say that thought. What I see right here in front of me feels like if Chris Chan could draw slightly better. That's what that picture looks like to me. Holy crap. With the exception of, you know, the three that are in a different style. Oh my gosh. Let's continue and...
He is throwing every single character that he has ever made into the Laura Sue Chronicles because he knows nobody's going to do anything about it. Though he doesn't realize that he's such small potatoes that it's easier for them to just let Penders be an annoying little pest than give him the time of day. Penders even decided to push the envelope by straight up stealing the character of Shade from Sonic Chronicles.
Balls. Okay, so he's stealing a character of Shade from Chronicles. I'll tackle that in a minute. But I did pause it at the right time this time with I'm resolving a certain topic in the Laura Sue Chronicles. I'm definitely establishing that Shade was Julie Sue's deep cover. Let me readjust my words here. Jeez. Because it didn't roll off the tongue that well. Julie Sue's deep cover name while on assignments for Cyberdark Colony prior to meeting Nux. And yes, she did wear the armor depicted in the Sonic Chronicles game at times. So essentially he's trying to steal Shade and all that from a game, and oh my gosh, you know, judging by that tweet, it feels like Ken Penders is honestly a little bit Chris Chan-esque. Because Chris Chan will claim other people's work as his own, just like he's doing with Julie Sue, and claiming that it's been Shade the whole time. Granted, I don't know nothing about Shade and the character that is Shade, but if it's an original character that is not his creation, then he should not be able to claim it. So, yeah. Let's continue and
by giving her armor and name to Julie Sue, even though he had literally nothing to do with Shade's design or creation in the first place. But I mean, what are Sega and EA gonna do about it? Go back to court over a long-forgotten character from a long-forgotten game just because this man-child can't move on past his glory days? Look, there is zero doubt that Penders was a prolific creator and left a massive impact on the world of Sonic. But as it's done for almost 2 decades since his departure, it can do fine, and even better without him. Despite this, Penders is still chiming away on Twitter, constantly threatening more lawsuits, which he never follows through.
Balls, okay. Another tweet from him. This one was in 2015. Wow, this is old. Maybe certain comic book publishers don't believe in living up to their side of the bargain, but I do. Don't blame me for what happens next. And I'm presuming nothing happened next, but let's continue and
on, while also constantly boasting about how he's more than happy to
pausing
license
for
his
that
characters out to Sega for any Sonic-related project that they might want to do. And he's also open to license out his characters for original works as well, which he did, and led to its own controversy. And you know what? That is actually a great segue into our final segment, about all the other weird, bad, embarrassing, and gross stuff that Penders has been up to.
Balls. Okay, so part 3, Kenneth the Menace. Okay, judging by the last line he said before we paused it, all of the gross stuff that Ken's been up to. I really hope, whatever he's up to is not depravity. But I'm not holding out hope, because I'm sure whatever he's been up to sucked. Oh my gosh. Let's do this. Hopefully it's nothing like horrible. We do only have like 4.5 minutes of this video left. So we're going to push through. We're going to get it done and just see what let's see what happens. And play.
Before we get into the licensing controversy, let's talk about some of the other weird and problematic stuff that Ken Penders is responsible for. I already talked about the weird Nazi shit in part 1, but how about how he's constantly trying to pair 16-year-old Sally Acorn with 25-year-old Joffrey, who is literally just Pepe Le Pew, but a soldier. But don't worry, it's okay, because Sally is actually 32 in squirrel years, and even if she wasn't, the age of consent in Utah is 16. Look, I don't trust anyone who knows what the age of consent laws are in random states off the top of their head.
Pause. Yes, that's the kind of weird depravity I was talking about. And Comic Drake brings up a very good point. I don't trust anybody either who knows the age of consent laws in random states. Oh my gosh. So he's trying to justify her getting with that other, he's trying to justify Sally getting with this skunk because Sally is actually 32 in scroll years. That's not how it works, Ken. When a character is canonically a certain age, we're thinking of those ages in human years, and you know that. You know that. And this is why a lot of people have so much trouble with the Judas contract for Teen Titans, because there's a certain individual in there, Deathstroke, his real version of himself, away from the mask, got with somebody the same age in the comics, and that makes a lot of people kind of be like, I don't know about this one anymore. So, yeah. But, I don't know. Where I've got to pause now, though, because he was about to move on to something else. As promised, what I'm reading here, as promised, here's the drawing I did as requested for the winning Sonic fan who voted on election day. So somebody's getting their feet tickled by Dr. Robotnik. Oh gosh, let's listen to Comic Drake talk about this. Play.
But what about the weird tickle fetish commission art that he did? How about the fact that he requires people to put his copyrights on their fan art and fan fiction? What about the time when Scourge impersonated Sonic and tricked Bunny into laying with him, where it's heavily implied that they had sex? That's just assault. And you know what? Okay, let's talk about Scourge. Originally, he was just an evil version of Sonic from an alternate evil universe named Evil Sonic. Well, in literally the first issue after Penders left Archie Comics, the new Sonic writer Ian Flynn completely redid his character by turning him into the fan favorite Scourge the Hedgehog. In 2001, though, Penders decided to license Scourge to the indie publisher Rush Comics. But as you might have noticed, that name and design are all things that weren't the creation of Ken Penders, and presumably he doesn't actually have the rights to hand those out. It's like how Winnie the Pooh is now a public domain character, but if you give him a red shirt, then that's Disney's version of the character, and you can get sued for that. Well, funny thing about the Scourge comic, the lead artist for the book was outed as being a white supremacist, and the Sonic community rightfully tore him to shreds. Plus,
Pause. good on you, Sonic community, for doing that. Holy crap. I don't... Ken... This is a good overview of Ken, but I'm wondering if I should do a part 2 to the Ken Penders saga, because it feels like Ken has way more stuff other than just, hey, you know what, I got some legal issues I'm going to have with Sega and Archie Comics. He's got a lot of other crap. Yeah, he's trying to license out a character he doesn't even own. But then again, he's already, he's already done copyright infringement multiple times, even though he's literally going to court for copyright issues. Oh my gosh, Ken, you are literally, you're pretty much Christian. Oh my gosh, let's continue.
The writer's previous work was about a speedster character that ripped women's clothes off. So Assault. These dudes got so much backlash for that, and also just for being associated with Penders in the first place, that they had to cancel the comic in like a couple of days. They put out this really passive-aggressive apology and said that they refunded all of the donations, but here's the kicker. The Patreon that was funding them only got $29 in pledges. In other Penders trash, Ken announced his plans to get into the NFT game, with each of them priced at $100,000. Yeah, if you want to be the proud owner of this god-awful JPEG and access to bonus material for the weird Space Echidna book that is probably never ever going to see the light of day, then go nuts. You never deserve to have that kind of money in the first place.
Balls. Okay, so... That makes sense for Ken Penders to think that he can do NFTs, because NFTs are scams anyway. So yeah, it makes sense for Penders to want to do an NFT version of, Laura Sue and all them, because he's a scammy person, so might as well do the NFT scam. Oh my gosh. Ken. Let's continue, because hopefully it's not off by like a millisecond or so. But what I see in front of me right now is some echidnas with some bows and arrows from the movie. So let's see what kind of stupidity Ken wants to put out there this time. And play.
We also have Ken getting up in arms about the live-action Sonic movies because there's echidnas in them, screaming to the heavens that those are his characters. Nothing has actually come out of this though, because Ken just loves to threaten lawsuits and then do literally nothing. But he has claimed that he's not scared of going to bat against Paramount. Maybe he's just waiting for the Knuckles TV show to drop so he can rage even more.
Balls. Okay, so... Ken is literally stupid. I'm sorry, he just is. Just because they have echidnas in there doesn't mean that they're his creations. Echidnas are not his creation. Echidnas are all a part of Sega and all of their stuff. He didn't create the tribe of echidnas. He needs to go somewhere with this kind of crap. That's just, oh my gosh. But let's look at this. He's got a little tweet here. I don't know when it was from, 2022. This is a pretty neat comparison. And this is from Delaware Cyber Diva. Wow, at Paramount Plus should just write this man a check. At Sonic Movie, hashtag support writers and artists. Twitter.com Ken Penders. And let's look at this a little bit closer. And I don't think they really... No, that's not a good comparison, because all it's literally doing is having Sonic climb onto the wing of Tails' plane. And they're trying to compare it to a panel from the Sonic comics. Okay. Why don't you try to sue Paramount? See how far you get there, Ken. Because that would be laughable. That would be something I would even cover on here. Hopefully he doesn't do that, because honestly, I don't want to cover Ken. let's continue and...
Oh, and let's not forget that Ken also acts like he's the one that invented the concept of Sonic standing on a plane. Sir, that was from the goddamn video game. You didn't make that. The best thing that Ken Penders has ever done was set the stage for his successor, Ian Flynn, to clean up his mess and rework the Sonic comics into something even better. Even when Archie Comics lost the rights to the Sonic license in 2017, Flynn went over to IDW to write the reboot. And you know what? It's really fucking good. And that's even with the fuck ton of mandates and restrictions from Sega, who are trying to prevent another Pendering from ever happening ever again. The IDW Sonic comics are, in my opinion, some of the best Sonic-related anything out there. And the love and passion that Ian Flynn has for his work and his fans is incredible. Meanwhile, Penders is constantly shit-talking about Flynn on Twitter because he's so desperate to live in the past. Ken Penders is a sad, sad man. He hasn't worked on Sonic in almost 20 years, and yet he's devoted his life to it. He's a deeply bitter narcissist who's constantly yelling about his detractors on Twitter and hyping himself up as this creative savant, despite having not delivered anything for his beloved Lara Sue Chronicles. Look, I get it. Twitter brings out the worst in people. Yeah. The website actively encourages outrage, misinformation, and hate, with everybody trying their hardest to be witty assholes. I hate the person that Twitter encourages me to be, which is why I've left the platform entirely and hope to God that I am not masochistic enough to ever return to it. But Ken, I know you're watching this. You are deeply invested in your self-image, and you never miss an opportunity to engage in the digital self-harm that is watching negative videos about yourself. I have said a lot of mean things about you in this video, but I'm begging you, it's time to let Sonic go.
Pause. Okay, so I let it play for a little while. But, you know, Comic Drake brings up a valid point. He's living on the glory days of Sonic and isn't even doing anything with his precious, you know, I'm trying to think of a nice word instead of being rude and, you know, just rude in general. He hasn't done nothing with, I'll just say the name of the character instead of being mean. He hasn't done nothing with Lara Sue. And that's supposed to be like a little precious creation of his. And he hasn't done nothing with all the Echidna characters. Oh, well, Nux, which is Knuckles. Or Nox, or whatever. That's just Knuckles. My dude, you can't just steal a character. But, you know, it is what it is. He needs to let it go or continue on with the actual creation that he has. I mean, he's also had pilots for TV shows. He's had this other, you know, the World War II comic that he had in his head. In my opinion, that could be a good, you know, depending on who executes the story, which I don't think Ken Penders can do that. You know, the World War II, you know, with the, you know, bomb that was dropped and it whoever survives it has now mutations. That's a good idea for a story. That's just, you know, in my opinion, that is a good idea. Execution, however, is Ken. He doesn't know how to execute things very well, but I'm going to let Comic Drake continue on with what he's saying of giving the advice to Ken Penders to just let things go and move on with his life. So, yeah, let's go ahead and hit that play button, and I'm going to let it play all the way through the rest of the way, unless he says something like, oh my gosh, I got to pause it. Let's continue, though. And play.
Making yourself into this clown honking anytime an Echidna shows up is not doing you any favors. Yes, I think your current art is absolutely disgusting to look at, but you have shown that you're capable of making decent stuff. The Lara Sue Chronicles is not going to be a hit. It's not even going to be mildly successful, and I know that you know that. The best thing that you can do is just move on, man. Get off of Twitter. Take a breather. Disengage from Sonic discourse and use that creative brain to make something original. But guys, that's it. That's all I have. I want to give a big thank you to the Thanks Ken Penders and the Amazing Sally Hogan Tumblr accounts, because they were great resources for researching this topic and putting me on the right track of where to start hunting down the legal documents that I used to put this all together. And hey, if you want to learn more about the IDW Sonic comics for yourself, then I made a video when they first came out that really captured my initial excitement. Who knows, if this video does well, then maybe I'll dive into those books for a future video. But anyway, guys, I hope you learned at least a little something new, and hopefully, I'll see you next time.
Okay, so yes, I did let it finish playing through there because if I'm being honest with y'all, it's that time of the year where I'm not going to be recording like this again unless I have the truck fully running, or if it's like 50 degrees outside where it'll be nice and cool in here, because it's at that unhappy medium where it's a little warm in here and I could tell I got a little bit of glistening, and I don't want that. Nobody wants that. But yeah, Ken Penders, he's, gosh dang, my dude, you could, well, I was gonna say you could be a decent guy, but considering, oh my gosh, you got a few little incidences where you kind of need to think about things, such as the whole Sally getting with this skunk character, and Sally being, what, 16, and the skunk being like 25. You kind of need to rethink your thoughts on that whole situation, because you can't just claim, oh no, she's 32 in squirrel years. Well, you know what? She's 16 in human years, and she's oh jeez, I gotta get this word out of my mouth correctly. Anthropomorphic. Gosh dang, it's been a long day. I've also been recording for an hour and 15 minutes. I've driven well over 500 miles today, if that any clue on how long of a day it's been. But anthropomorphic, jeez, that ain't, y'all know what I'm trying to say. I'm not even going to try. Pretty much they're an animal in human form. So, 16 years old. I don't care. That's how old they are. No squirrel years, no nothing. And on top of that, how would you even know how old someone is in squirrel years? That doesn't make sense. Oh my gosh. And then you have the SA with Evil Sonic. It's just, age of consent in random states. That's kind of weird. I feel like if it wasn't for that weirdness, Ken Penders might be somebody that's kind of like, okay, he's quirky, but we can overlook, he's quirky, but he's okay. As long as he chills out a little. But you just don't chill. Ken doesn't chill at all. He's probably still on Twitter /X, whatever, moaning and groaning and complaining about echidnas and this and that. I wouldn't be surprised if he wasn't complaining about Shadow or anything. And then on top of that, he steals characters from things that he didn't even create, such as Shade. He didn't create that character. He's just like, oh no, that was an alias. That was an alias of, this person. So really, that's my character. That's some Chris Chan stuff there, y'all. Oh my gosh. Yeah. So other than that, I am wore out. So what I'm going to do is get this truck, set up the whole auto start stop thing, and actually get this truck comfortable again, because I can tell that I've got a little sweat starting to happen, and I don't want that. I'm not one of them drivers who's going to sit here and just sweat. And yeah, I can't. There's some nasty drivers out there, and I'm certainly not going to be one of them. So I'm going to get off of here so I don't sweat. Crank this truck up, get it comfortable. We've been talking about Ken Penders for way too long now. So I'll be glad to just stop this and leave it up to y'all to jump down to the comments and all that good stuff. And yes, I'm a little late saying it, but yes, description, pinned comment, Comic Drake's channel will be linked down below, and the original video to that will be linked as well. All that good stuff. Either way though, it is way too warm in here, so hit that like, tickle to subscribe. Don't be texting and driving. Watch what you love and love what you watch. And take it away, Mr. Rogers.
I like you just the way you are.